There is a moment, one single moment, that changes everything. Not a war, not a dramatic confrontation in a crowded room, not a speech or a threat or a breaking point that announces itself with noise. Just a quiet click of a side gate, footsteps in a dark corridor, and a maid stepping out of the shadows to stop the most feared man in the city with 5 words. Don't say a word, not yet. What he saw in the next 60 seconds destroyed everything he thought he knew about his life, his wife, his partner, his empire, the people he had trusted with everything. They had been working together, quietly and patiently, to make sure he never saw another sunrise. And the only person who knew, the only person who had been watching, collecting, waiting, and protecting him without ever being asked, was the woman he had never once looked at directly. This is her story, and his, and it will stay with you long after it ends. Before we begin, drop your location in the comments right now. Where in the world are you watching this? Whether it's midnight where you are or the middle of your afternoon, let me know. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is the kind of story you will want to come back for, and there are more coming that are just as gripping as this one. We are just getting started. Now, let's go back to that night. He entered quietly. No warning. No headlights in the driveway. No phone call ahead. And I was the only one awake to see it, standing in the shadow of the stairwell with 18 months of secrets pressed against my chest, watching the most feared man in the city walk straight into the worst night of his life. I had waited for this moment. I had prepared for it. But when it finally came, my hands were shaking. My name is Abina. I was his maid, and I was the only person in that house who was trying to keep him alive. The clock on the kitchen wall read 11:47 p.m. when I heard the side gate click open. I knew that sound. I had memorized every sound in that house: the groan of the east hallway floorboard, the particular hiss of the study's air vent, the way the marble entrance cooled and ticked at night like a slow heartbeat. I had learned them all the way you learn the sounds of a place you are trying to survive inside. I was in the kitchen rinsing a glass when I heard it. One soft click, then careful footsteps, the kind a person makes when they do not want to be heard. My first thought was an intruder. My second thought stopped me cold. Only one person used that gate. The side entrance was connected to a private keypad. No code had been changed. No alarm had been triggered. Whoever was coming through that gate belonged there. I set the glass down without a sound. I moved to the edge of the corridor and looked toward the entrance. The figure that stepped through the interior door was tall, dressed in dark travel clothes, a single bag over one shoulder. He moved the way powerful men move, like the space around him adjusted itself to make room. Mr. Shin Yiho, my employer, the man who was supposed to be in Seoul for 2 more days. He was home. My stomach dropped, because I knew what was happening in his study right now. I knew who was in there. I knew what was spread across his desk. And I knew that if he walked down that corridor without warning, without preparation, without me, everything I had spent months building would collapse in a single, violent moment, and we would both be in danger before sunrise. I moved without thinking. I came out of the shadow of the stairwell and stepped directly into his path. He stopped. His eyes locked onto mine, sharp, suspicious, already calculating. His hand moved slightly toward his side. I held both of mine up open, and I looked at him with every piece of steadiness I had left in my body. "Don't say a word," I said quietly. "Not yet. Come with me first." He stared at me for 3 full seconds. I counted them. Then he followed me into the kitchen pantry. I cracked the pantry door open 2 inches, just enough. "Look," I whispered. He looked, and I watched the face of a man who had built an empire on never being surprised go completely, terrifyingly still. Through the gap, the corridor to his private study was visible. The study door was open. The desk lamp was on, and in its light, 2 figures moved with the calm of people who believed they were completely alone. The first was Director Kang, Mr. Shin's oldest business partner. The man who had stood beside him for 15 years, who had given the speech at his mother's funeral, who called himself a brother in all but blood. The second was Mrs. Shin, his wife, Clara. She was not crying. She was not afraid. She sat in her husband's chair with a red pen in her hand, correcting figures on a document spread across his desk like she was editing a school report. Director Kang stood beside her, reading numbers aloud from a folder, account codes, transfer amounts, property references, and she responded to each one with a small nod or a quiet correction. Then Kang said the words that changed everything. Once the board confirms the vote Thursday, he won't be able to prove any of it, even if he's still alive by then. Clara did not flinch. She did not pause. She simply asked, in the same light voice she used to order groceries, "Is Daniel ready to take his seat?" Daniel, his younger cousin, hungry and resentful and always waiting just outside the circle of power. Beside me in the dark, I felt Mr. Shin's entire body go rigid. I pressed my hand against his forearm, not gently, firmly, because I had seen enough of powerful men to know what happened when their rage outran their thinking. And if he moved now, if he walked through that door now, we would not leave this house safely. He turned to look at me in the dark. His eyes asked the question before his mouth did. I answered it quietly. "I know," I said. "I've been watching this for months, and I have proof." He did not speak for a long moment after I said that. We moved deeper into the pantry, away from the cracked door, and I told him what I needed to tell him in the lowest voice I could manage. 18 months ago, when I first came to work in this house, I noticed something small. Mrs. Clara received a private courier every first Monday of the month. The package was never addressed to the house. It was addressed to a name I did not recognize, a company name, and something about that name caught in my memory like a splinter because I had seen it once before. On a contract my father had been deceived by back home before he lost everything. A shell company, same structure. Different country. I paid attention after that. I did not have the language or the connections to go to lawyers or investigators. I was a maid. I cleaned rooms. I carried trays. I was furniture with a heartbeat, and I understood the way you understand things when you have lived your whole life being overlooked. That being invisible was actually the most powerful thing I had. So I watched, I listened, I collected. 3 months in, I started photographing documents I found left carelessly on desks when I cleaned. I copied account numbers written on note papers into a small book I kept inside my cleaning cart. I noted names, dates, patterns. 6 weeks ago, I compiled everything into an envelope. I sealed it. I taped it to the inside panel of my cleaning cart, beneath the spare cloths, and I waited. "I didn't know when you'd come home," I told him, "but I knew you would, and I knew I needed to have everything ready when you did." I reached into my apron and took out the envelope. I held it out to him in the dark. He took it slowly. He opened it slowly. Inside, photographs of documents, account transfer copies, pages from a ledger I had carefully duplicated, a small USB drive. And one more thing, a document I had found 3 weeks ago that had kept me awake every night since. A death certificate, his name, predated for the following week. He held the death certificate in both hands and did not move. I gave him time. I had learned that about him in 18 months, not from conversations, because he barely spoke to me, but from observation. He was not a man who processed things quickly by talking. He went still. He went inward. And then, when he moved again, he had already decided. The death certificate was not dramatic in its appearance. It was a standard form, the kind issued quietly, the kind that passed through administrative channels without much scrutiny when the right signatures were in place. His name, a date 7 days from now, cause of death listed as cardiac failure, a cremation order attached beneath it. Planned, quiet, clean. I watched him set the paper down and look at me. "There's more," I said. 2 weeks before his early return, a man had come to the house claiming to service the private water filtration system. I had never seen him before. We had a regular contractor, a company that had serviced the estate for years. This man was not from that company. I knew it immediately, but I had no authority to turn him away. Mrs. Clara had let him in herself. I photographed him, through the kitchen window before he left. When I showed Mr. Shin the photograph on my phone, his face changed in a way I had not seen before. Not anger, recognition. He knew this man. He told me, in a flat and careful voice, that this person worked for a private medical firm, one that operated in spaces where pharmaceutical and criminal overlapped. One that Director Kang had used before, years ago, for reasons Mr. Shin had never fully investigated. The water system had been tampered with. The dizziness he had blamed on overwork. The fatigue he had explained away with late nights. It all reframed itself in his eyes as he sat there in the pantry with a death certificate in his hand. I let him sit with it. Then I said, "I stopped drinking the house water 6 weeks ago. I switched to bottled." He looked at me. "And every morning before you woke up," I said, "I replaced your water too." His jaw tightened. "You've been keeping me alive," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said, "and you never once noticed me." He sat on the kitchen floor. Not on a chair, not leaning against the counter. On the floor, with his back against the cabinet and his hands resting on his knees and his eyes looking at something that was not in the room with us. I had never seen him sit like that. I had seen him at his desk, at the head of his dining table, in the back seat of his car. I had seen him stand at windows for long stretches, looking out at the city he controlled. But I had never seen him reduced to the floor. It made him look, for the first time, like a person. I sat across from him on a low step stool and let the quiet be what it needed to be. He thought for a long time about his wife. I could see him moving through memories, recalibrating each one. Her unusual calm in recent months, her gentle encouragement that he stepped back from certain meetings, her careful warmth every morning when she handed him his green juice, the one she had started making herself about 3 months ago, insisting she wanted to do something small and loving. The one I had quietly replaced each time, with a version prepared from ingredients I had monitored myself. All of it rewritten, all of it poison wearing the face of love. He looked at me eventually and asked why I had not left, why I had not mailed the evidence anonymously and walked away. I thought of my grandmother. I thought of the things she used to say when I was young, back home, before everything became complicated. She used to say that truly powerful people do not need the room to know what they are. They simply do what needs to be done. Anonymous letters don't save people, I told him. Someone has to stay in the room. He looked at me for a long time after that, the way people look when they are seeing something they should have seen much earlier. His phone lit up on the counter where he had set it. A message from Clara, cheerful, warm, asking if he had landed safely, saying she missed him at dinner. She did not know he was home. He stared at that message, and I watched him understand clearly, completely, that he still had time. He made the decision fast. That was the thing about him. Once he had processed something, he moved without hesitation. He would not reveal himself, not yet. If Clara did not know he was home, there was a window. He had time to work before they realized the plan had been disrupted. He would stay hidden, stay quiet, and spend the next 48 hours dismantling everything they had built before they understood he was standing. But there were problems. His phone was almost certainly monitored. His car had a tracker. His laptop connected to the estate's network, which was managed by a security chief Director Kang had personally recommended. The house staff, beyond me, he could not verify. Any one of them might have been turned. He laid all of this out methodically, and I listened. When he finished, he arrived at the same conclusion I had reached months earlier. There was no one he could trust in this house except me. He was a man who controlled thousands of people, and the only loyal person within his walls was the woman who cleaned his floors. I watched him absorb that. "We use the staff quarters," I said. "The east wing, ground level. Mrs. Clara has never set foot back there. Director Kang has never visited. It does not appear on the household's main security grid because you told the installation team it was a staff-only zone and did not need full coverage." He looked at me. "How do you know what I told the installation team?" "I was cleaning the corridor when you said it," I replied. No one tells the maid to leave the room. He almost smiled. It was small. It disappeared quickly. We moved to the staff quarters. He carried nothing. He had arrived light on purpose, a habit from years of unpredictable travel. I brought the envelope, my phone, and the cleaning cart with its hidden contents. We refined the plan. He would operate from here. I would be his connection to the rest of the house. Then we heard the front door open. Clara was home. She was not supposed to return until morning. I moved before he could. I pressed my palm flat against his chest, stop, and I was already turning, already smoothing my expression into something ordinary, already becoming the version of myself that this house expected. Calm, invisible, useful. I stepped out of the staff corridor into the kitchen and came around the corner just as Clara's heels clicked across the entrance marble. She was still in her evening clothes. Something had pulled her back early. I could see it in the set of her jaw. A controlled agitation, a plan slightly off schedule. "Ma'am," I said, "you're back early. Can I get you something?" She looked at me with eyes that were scanning rather than seeing. "Has anyone come to the property tonight? Any vehicles on the rear camera?" My heartbeat was steady. 18 months had trained it to be. "No, ma'am," I said. "It's been a quiet evening. Would you like tea?" She studied me for a moment. Not long, 3, maybe 4 seconds, but I felt every one of them. Then she said, "No, I'll sleep. Make sure the east corridor light is off. It was on last time." "Of course," I said. "Good night, ma'am." She walked upstairs. I waited. I counted her footsteps across the upper landing, heard the bedroom door close, waited 3 more minutes before I moved back to the staff quarters. Mr. Shin was standing just inside the doorway, back flat against the wall, listening. I sat down across from him and picked up my notepad. I had been writing during the interaction, not obviously, just small marks on the pad I always carried. Habit, evidence practice. I tore the page carefully and placed it on the table between us. "She's suspicious, not certain, but watching. We have 48 hours, not 72. He read it, nodded once. Then he reached for my old spare phone, the basic one I used for personal calls, and opened his email through the browser. He went very still. Someone had been managing his inbox. Entire threads deleted. Messages from people he trusted, gone before he ever saw them. And sitting in the trash folder, 3 levels deep, was a meeting invitation sent to his account 4 days ago. A meeting he had never been told about. He went through the inbox slowly, carefully, the way you go through a room after a flood looking for what survived and what was lost. The pattern went back 14 months. A message from his company's legal team, flagging unusual asset movements, deleted. A message from his private doctor, asking for an urgent follow-up after blood work showed abnormal results, deleted. A message from an elderly man named Chairman O, his father's closest friend, warning him vaguely, but urgently that something felt wrong inside his inner circle, marked as read, replied to with a polite and generic response, and then buried. Someone had replied on his behalf. Someone had managed his relationships as carefully as his finances, and he had never known. He had not been betrayed suddenly. He had been slowly, deliberately blinded. He continued through the deleted folder. He found a thread between Director Kang and an unfamiliar address, careful language, indirect discussing behavioral reports. Notes on Mr. Shin's mood, travel patterns, decision-making habits. Detailed, regular. Someone close had been providing this. He traced the email signature. His personal assistant, a man named Roy who had been with him for 3 years, who brought his morning briefing, who scheduled his calls, who knew at all times exactly where he was and what he was thinking. Mr. Shin set the phone down. Roy was scheduled to arrive at the estate at 7 in the morning with the day's briefing documents, 4 hours away. If Roy arrived and found the house operating normally, if he sent even a single message reporting that Director Kang would know the timeline was disrupted. Mr. Shin looked at me. "Can you handle the morning?" he asked. "Yes," I said. I had already been thinking about it. Roy arrived at 7, 11:02 a.m. I met him at the front entrance with the same calm I had maintained for 18 months. He was a compact man, always neatly dressed, always slightly too aware of his own importance. He carried a leather folder and a coffee from the place 2 blocks away, Mr. Shin's usual order. "Roy," I said pleasantly. "Mr. Shin called early this morning from Seoul. His return is delayed by another day. He said to leave the briefing documents with me." Roy hesitated. This was a slight deviation from routine. I watched him calculate. "He usually confirms directly when there's a change," he said. "His connection was poor," I said. "He asked me to relay it and said he'd call you directly this afternoon." I smiled and reached for the folder. "I'll sign for the documents." He handed them over. I signed. I offered him the coffee he had brought, insisted he take it back since Mr. Shin would not be needing it, and walked with him back to the entrance with comfortable, forgettable small talk. Before he stepped out, I mentioned, casually, that Director Kang's assistant had called yesterday about the midweek hotel meeting. Just making conversation, confirming nothing, just listening. Roy said without thinking, "Right, the Regent, Wednesday evening." He was gone before he realized what he had said. I walked back to the staff quarters and placed the folder on the table. "The Regent Hotel," I said. "Wednesday evening, that is where the board vote is being prearranged, tonight." Mr. Shin looked at the folder. Then he looked at me with an expression I had not seen on him before. Not gratitude exactly. Something more complicated. The look of a person beginning to understand they had misjudged something important. He said he needed someone inside that hotel meeting. Someone with legal knowledge. Someone who could observe without raising suspicion. There was only one person he could think of. A woman he had pushed out of his life 2 years ago because Director Kang told him not to trust her. He sat with that for a moment. Then he picked up my spare phone and dialed a number from memory. Her name was Grace. She had been his company's head of legal until Director Kang recommended her removal, describing her to Mr. Shin as overcautious and disloyal. She had raised concerns about a particular contract Kang had structured. Mr. Shin had dismissed those concerns without fully reading them. She had been right. He had been managed. When she heard his voice on the phone, the silence was long, weighted. The kind of silence that holds many unsaid things together by sheer discipline. He did not smooth it over. He simply said, "You were right about Kang. I need your help. I have 36 hours. Another silence, shorter this time. "Start talking," she said. He told her everything. He laid it out without softening or justifying. The documents, the forged signatures, the water tampering, the death certificate, the prearranged board vote. He told her about me. He told her what I had collected and how long I had been collecting it. Grace listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "I've been building a parallel case for 8 months. I couldn't connect it without your internal documents. If what your maid gathered is what you're describing, together we have enough." He looked at me across the table. I was already organizing the documents, date order, category, ready to photograph and send. He had not asked me to do this. I had simply begun. Grace said she could get into the Regent through a contact who owed her a professional favor. She could observe the pre-meeting dinner and report back. But she needed one thing first. Before she put herself at risk again for this man who had dismissed her without looking her in the eye, she needed his written acknowledgement that she had been wrongfully removed. On record. Signed. Mr. Shin agreed without argument. He asked me for paper. He sat with the pen for a while before he wrote anything. I did not rush him. I made tea and set it at his elbow, and I went to the other side of the room and let him be alone with the page. Writing the acknowledgement should have been simple. A factual correction. A few sentences confirming that Grace had been removed based on false information and that her professional concerns had been legitimate and deliberately suppressed. But he kept stopping, starting again, sitting back. Because the letter was not just about Grace. It was about a pattern, the ease with which he had been turned against loyal people. The arrogance that had made him believe his judgment was sound when it was being carefully shaped by someone else. Writing it down meant numbing that. At some point, he stopped writing entirely and just sat. He asked me, quietly, how I managed it. 18 months in a house that treated me like part of the furniture. How I came to work every day without breaking and without becoming bitter. I thought about my grandmother again. The people who are truly strong, I told him, do not need the room to acknowledge it. They just do what needs to be done. He looked at me for a long time. Then he went back to the letter. When he finished, he had written 2 pages. The first was what Grace asked for. The second, unprompted, unsigned until he paused and then signed it, was a full account of what he now believed and why Grace's original concerns had been deliberately buried. He photographed both pages and sent them. Grace called back in 4 minutes. "I'll be at the Regent by 7, she said. His phone lit up at that exact moment. A text from Clara to my number, asking me to prepare the master suite. He'll be home tomorrow. Make sure everything is perfect. She was setting the stage for his return, his last night home. I went to the master suite alone. I moved the way I always moved in that room, steady, thorough, unhurried. I changed the linens. I adjusted the curtains. I straightened the items on the dresser. Then I found it. It was on the nightstand, placed with care. A supplement bottle, the label written in Clara's handwriting. His name. Below it, a small folded note tucked beneath the base, "For your sleep, my love." I did not touch it with my bare hand. I used the cloth from my apron. I photographed it from 3 angles. Then I went to his bathroom cabinet, found the identical supplement, the real one, the safe one, and replaced the nightstand bottle with it. The original I sealed inside a small evidence bag I had kept in my cart for exactly this kind of moment. I brought it back and set it on the table between us. He picked it up, turned it over, read the label and then the note. He held it for a long time. "She was going to do it herself," he said, quietly, like he was identifying something he had not wanted to find. I did not answer because there was nothing to say. That bottle and that note, the word love written in her handwriting, was somehow more devastating than any forged document. The financial transfers had been Kang's architecture. This was personal. She had written his name and the word love on something designed to kill him. His phone buzzed on the table. A message from Daniel, his cousin. "It's done. Board is locked. Thursday is just a ceremony. You were right. He never suspected a thing." Daniel was messaging Kang's number. He had used the wrong contact. He was talking to Mr. Shin. Mr. Shin read the message twice. I read it over his shoulder. We both caught the same thing at the same moment. A phrase inside the message. You were right. It was not the language of someone who had designed a conspiracy. It was the language of someone who had been persuaded into one. "He doesn't sound like someone who built this," I said carefully. Mr. Shin was quiet. He knew his cousin. He knew Daniel's hunger, his old resentment, the chip he had carried for years about being on the outside of everything. "Kang would have found him that way," I said, "and used it." He dialed Daniel's number from my spare phone. When Daniel picked up, confused by the unknown number, Mr. Shin said simply, "It's me." The silence from Daniel's end lasted several seconds. Then what came through was not defiance, not boldness. It was panic, and underneath the panic, something that sounded like relief, like someone who had been holding their breath for a very long time. Daniel talked fast. He unraveled as he spoke. Kang had come to him 8 months ago with an old debt, a mistake Daniel had made years earlier that Kang had apparently documented without his knowledge. Not a request for help, a condition. Cooperate or the debt becomes public. Daniel had felt not like a partner in this. He had felt like a prisoner. Mr. Shin listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, he said only, "I need a statement, everything you know, written tonight." Daniel agreed immediately. Then Daniel said, "There's something else. If the board vote fails for any reason at all, Kang has a second plan. Someone already inside the company, authorized to execute an emergency asset freeze. Someone you trust." He paused. Someone who will be at the Thursday session. Daniel gave him the name. Mr. Shin did not react immediately. He went still, the deep, total stillness of a building in the second before something in it gives way. The name was Ms. Yun, Chief Financial Officer, a woman who had been with his company since the very first year, who had sent a handwritten card when his mother died, who had once sat beside him in a hospital corridor for 3 hours, not asked to, simply present, simply there. I watched his face during that silence and I understood. This one was different from all the others. Not strategic grief, real grief. The kind that arrives when you realize the person you trusted most was also the most thoroughly handled. She needed money once, he said. Years ago, a family situation. I gave it to her without conditions. I told her it was not a loan. He paused. Kang must have found that, framed it as a transaction, made her feel owned by it. I thought about it. Or he made her feel like her silence was the repayment, I said. He stood up. Something had clarified in him. The grief had moved through him quickly, the way it does in people who have spent their lives having to function inside pain. We need to reach her before Thursday, he said, before Kang does. I picked up my phone to check the time, and I found a message from Sierra, a younger member of the house staff who had once passed me an extra key when mine was lost. The only person in the household I considered something close to an ally. The message read, "They're asking questions about you. Specifically, the maid, please be careful tonight." I showed it to Mr. Shin, without a word. "They know something is wrong," I said. "Not what, not yet, but we have less time than we thought." Clara sent 2 messages, within 20 minutes of each other. The first came to my phone directly, asking me to confirm I would be at the house all day tomorrow. The second went to the household manager, asking whether I had received any unusual visitors or made any calls outside my normal schedule in recent days. She was checking, quietly, carefully, the way she did everything. I showed both messages to Mr. Shin. He was on his feet before I finished explaining. "We move you out now," he said. "Tonight." I shook my head. He looked at me with the impatience of a man, used to his decisions being final. "If I disappear tonight," I said calmly, "she knows something is wrong. She calls Kang. Kang accelerates everything. The board meeting moves up, the asset freeze triggers, and we lose every advantage we've built." "They're talking about you specifically," he said. "I know. That is not a risk It is mine to decide," I said. The words landed between us. He stopped. I had not raised my voice. I had not been emotional about it. I had simply stated a fact with the same quiet certainty I had used every day in this house to hold myself together. My safety, my risk, my choice. He recognized it because he understood it. It was the same language he used when people tried to manage his decisions. He backed down. We spent the next hour compressing the plan. Everything that had been scheduled for 48 hours, we restructured for 24. Every action prioritized. Every contact identified and sequenced. Then Grace called from outside, the Regent Hotel. "I'm in," she said. "But Yeeho, there's someone at this dinner I did not expect." She gave the name. Deputy Minister Cho, a government official who had praised Mr. Shin's company publicly twice in the past year. A man who had shaken his hand at 2 galas and spoken about economic integrity with a straight face. Kang had political protection. Grace was already seated inside through a contact when she began sending careful, minimal messages. Deputy Minister Cho sat at the far end of the table. Kang moved around the room with the ease of a man who believed everything was in order. He was expansive, warm, running the space the way he always did, like a conductor who knew every instrument. Daniel's chair at the dinner was occupied. Ms. Yun's was empty. Grace messaged, "Yun didn't come, significant." Mr. Shin read this and was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his own phone, the one that had been silent and trackable this whole time, and dialed Ms. Yun directly. She picked up on the second ring. He did not accuse her or give her time to construct a defense. He spoke plainly. He told her he knew what Kang had told her. He knew how the money had been reframed. And he needed her to know that what Kang described as a transaction had never been that, and that he had never thought of her as anything other than someone he trusted and had badly failed to protect. The line was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Yun said, "Where are you?" He told her. She said she would be at the estate in 20 minutes. Grace messaged at the same moment. Kang just left the table. He's outside making a call. He looks focused, not casual. Kang was responding to something, a gap somewhere in the picture he thought he controlled. Mr. Shin looked at me. "He's realizing something is off," I said. "How long before he acts on it?" I thought about the timeline, the board session, the steps Kang would have prearranged. "He'll move the vote," I said. "He won't wait until Thursday." Ms. Yun arrived in 19 minutes. She was still in her work clothes, coat buttoned, a thick folder pressed under her arm. She came through the side entrance. I had left it unlocked and guided her by message. She stopped when she stepped into the staff quarters and saw him. Then she saw me. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I recognized, the same recalibration I had seen in Grace's voice during their brief exchange. The look of someone adjusting their understanding of a person they had never properly seen before. "You figured it out," she said, not to him, to me. Then she turned to Mr. Shin and placed the folder on the table. Inside it was everything. Ms. Yun was meticulous. She was proud of her work in the quiet way people are when professional integrity is the foundation of their identity. And even under pressure from Kang, even believing she was trapped, she had maintained a parallel set of financial records. Clean, time-stamped, her own signature on every page. She had not destroyed them. She had not falsified them. She had kept them because she could not make herself do otherwise. Kang had never known. "He told me you had already approved the arrangement," she said. Her voice was controlled but barely. "He said you were managing the liability quietly and that I was to process the transfers without documentation. I didn't understand it was fraud until 6 months ago." She paused. "By then I felt like I had no way out." "You were deceived," Mr. Shin said. "Not complicit. There is a difference and it matters." Ms. Yun's composure held for another second. Then it broke, briefly, cleanly, the way it breaks in people who have been holding something enormous together for too long. Grace called. Not a message this time, a direct call. Her voice was low and fast. He came back into the dinner smiling. Whatever he arranged outside, it's been moved. The vote isn't Thursday. It's tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Kang had triggered the emergency session clause. Grace explained it quickly. The company's articles allowed for an expedited board session if 2 executive directors submitted a joint request citing operational urgency. 2 directors, both added to the board 18 months ago, both recommended by Kang, had signed the request. The session was now formally scheduled for 8 the following morning. By the time Mr. Shin would have returned home tomorrow evening, the company would already be restructured, assets transferred, signatures filed. His death, when it came, would have been almost administrative in its tidiness. He laid everything on the table. My documents, Ms. Yun's parallel records, Grace's observations, Daniel's testimony already being written into a formal statement. 4 separate threads collected in isolation, now pointing at the same center. Grace said what all of us were thinking. This is enough for a criminal case, but criminal cases take time. What you need tonight is someone who can make the vote legally impossible before it starts. Mr. Shin was already nodding. He knew exactly who that person was. He picked up my spare phone and dialed a number he had not called in 3 years. His father's personal attorney. An elderly man named Mr. O, who had drafted the company's original founding charter by hand, and who had once told Mr. Shin's father that the document contained something the son might need someday. The phone rang twice. A sharp, unimpressed voice answered. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Yes," Mr. Shin said. "I need Article 7. A pause, then, "Talk." Attorney O listened without interruption. When Mr. Shin finished, There was a considered pause. Article 7, subsection 4, Mr. O said. Your father insisted on including it. I told him it was an unnecessary complication, he said. My son will need it someday. I disagreed then. I appear to have been wrong. The clause was specific. Any emergency board session resulting in a change of executive control required a certified verification that the primary shareholder was either medically incapacitated or formally absent from the country, certified by a neutral medical authority unconnected to the company. Kang's emergency session had no such certification. Because Mr. Shin was not incapacitated, he was standing in the staff quarters of his own estate, entirely alert, holding a phone in his hand. Without the certification, the session was legally void. Any vote taken under it was unenforceable. Attorney O said he would file the formal challenge at 6 in the morning and have an injunction in place before the session opened. Then he added, dryly, tell my old friend's son to stop hiding in his own house. He ended the call. I had been listening from across the room. I stood and moved to the small kettle in the corner and began making tea, not because anyone had asked, because the night was about to turn. Mr. Shin looked at me with an expression that was difficult to name. Then the bedroom light upstairs came on, and Clara's footsteps, slow, measured, deliberate, began moving toward the stairs. She appeared in the kitchen doorway at 2:14 in the morning wearing silk and composure. Until she saw him. I watched her face do something extraordinary in the half-second after recognition landed. It did not fall apart. It recalibrated. Within 2 seconds, she had selected a strategy and begun performing it. The devoted wife, the confused woman, the person who had no idea what he could possibly think she had done. She said his name softly. She moved toward him. Her hand reached for his arm with practiced warmth. He let her touch his arm. He did not move it. He did not respond to it. He simply looked at her with the eyes of a man who had read a predated death certificate with his own name on it and spent the night understanding exactly how it came to exist. Clara felt the performance failing and shifted. Her voice tightened by a fraction. Whatever you've been told, whoever has been speaking to you. I stepped forward. Not quickly, not dramatically. I simply moved from where I had been standing and placed the supplement bottle, sealed in its evidence bag, on the kitchen counter between them. I said nothing. The bottle said everything. Clara looked at it, the label in her handwriting, the note she had written with the word love, the thing she had placed on his nightstand for his last night home. The performance ended. The room was very quiet. Then she looked at me, not at him, at me. I underestimated you, she said, flat, honest. She aimed the next part directly at me. I understood the calculation immediately. Mr. Shin was beyond reach. She could see it in the way he stood, the absolute absence of the doubt she had always been able to create in him before. So she turned to the one she thought might still have something to gain. She was almost respectful about it. She acknowledged my intelligence, my patience, my positioning. She laid out what she was offering: money, a reference that would open any door in any city, silence that benefited everyone. You're a smart woman, she said. You know what happens to people who stand between powerful people and what they want. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I said, your offer assumes I wanted something from this house. I didn't. She waited. I just didn't want to watch someone die when I could stop it, I said. Something moved across her face, not guilt exactly, but the recognition of a motivation she had no category for. She had planned for loyalty that could be bought, for fear that could be exploited. She had not planned for someone who simply did not want to watch a person die. Her composure thinned. You'll regret this, she said. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. Mr. Shin picked up his personal phone and made a call to a private security team, one that reported directly to his father's estate trustee, predating Kang's involvement entirely. 4 people. Quiet. Loyal to the Shin name before Kang had ever been part of it. Clara's phone lit up on the counter. Kang, calling. Kanu. She did not answer it. Kang called 3 more times in the following 4 minutes. Then the calls stopped, and the silence that followed meant someone had shifted from waiting to moving. Mr. Shin's private security team arrived within 11 minutes. 4 people, professional and quiet. They secured the estate without disturbance. Clara remained at the kitchen table, still, composed, apparently resigned in a way that I found more unsettling than anger would have been. Grace messaged at 3:40 a.m. Kang left the hotel fast, not his driver, a car that was waiting. Then, 12 minutes later, he went to the building directly. He's trying to run an emergency pre-session. Tonight, before any legal challenge can arrive in the morning. I had expected him to go quiet, to retreat. Instead, he was pushing forward, trying to execute the vote immediately, to make the restructure a completed fact before any court could intervene. It was panic dressed as boldness, and panic in careful people always reveals the thing they most cannot afford to lose. Ms. Yun, who had been sitting quietly at the table, stood up. She took her phone and made 2 calls in succession to 2 of the company's legitimate board members, men who had been with the organization for over a decade. She explained, in plain and careful language, what had been done in their name. Both demanded an immediate halt. One called the company's general legal counsel. The emergency pre-session Kang was attempting collapsed before it could be recorded. The official 8 a.m. session proceeded. Kang arrived with the expectation of a ceremony, the orderly transfer of a company from a man who no longer existed to the structure he had spent 14 months carefully building. He was composed when he walked through the door. Then Mr. Shin walked in. The silence moved across the room in a wave, starting from the doorway, spreading to every face around the table. A man who was supposed to be delayed, or dead, or oblivious was standing at the entrance of his own boardroom in a dark suit with Grace at his left and Attorney O's injunction already placed at every seat. Kang's composure held for 3 full seconds. Mr. Shin walked to his seat at the head of the table. He sat down. He let the room adjust. Then he placed a single document in front of Director Kang, the predated death certificate, his name, the cremation order. "I'd like to discuss the date on this," he said, quietly, without theater. The room was completely still. Kang looked at the certificate. He looked at Mr. Shin. He looked at the door. And in that glance, he made the decision that ended everything for him, not a calculated move, but the instinctive lurch of a man who had run out of options. He stood up and walked toward the exit. Grace stepped smoothly into the aisle. Attorney O lifted a hand toward the door, where 2 people were already waiting. Kang stopped, looked at the room, understood. He sat back down. The room had seen all of it. Every board member present had watched the man they were supposed to ratify walk toward the door at the sight of a document. There was nothing left to manage. Kang did not leave the building freely. Attorney O had anticipated every contingency. By the time Kang sat back down, the authorities were already coordinating outside. Daniel's written statement had been submitted at 5 in the morning. Ms. Yun's parallel financial records had been delivered to the financial regulator at 6. Grace's observations from the Regent dinner were already with a prosecutor she trusted. Daniel was not arrested. His coercion was thoroughly documented, his cooperation recognized. He would face small, proportionate consequences, but not the ones Kang had intended to bury him with. Deputy Minister Cho resigned from his position before midday. The statement cited personal reasons and said nothing else. Clara was formally arrested at the estate. She was still at the kitchen table when they came. She had not moved, had not called anyone, had not tried to leave. She walked out with the same composed posture she had always maintained, and I did not watch her go because there was nothing in that direction I needed to see. Ms. Yun spent 6 hours with Mr. Shin's legal team, documenting everything she knew. Her records, kept with integrity under conditions that would have broken most people, were central to the case. She was not prosecuted. She was a witness, a thorough and essential one. Grace formally returned to the company as legal counsel. Not as an employee this time, as a named partner with her name on the door, something that should have happened years before it did. The house was quiet by evening. Mr. Shin walked through the rooms alone for a while. I could hear his footsteps from the kitchen, the same footsteps I had learned to identify in the first weeks of working there. The sound of a man who moved like he owned everything and felt, most of the time, very little of it. Then I put my coat on. I packed my bag. I set it by the kitchen door. He came into the kitchen and stopped when he saw the bag. I told him when he asked that the job had never been the reason I stayed. I had stayed because the situation required it, because someone needed to be present and paying attention and unwilling to look away. That reason was gone now. The situation had resolved. I had other things to do, modest things entirely mine. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I spent 20 years building a company and I never noticed the most important person in it." I looked at him. "I was not in your company." "I mean here," he said, "in this house." He paused. Something moved across his face, the particular expression of a person who has spent their life holding things at a distance, arriving at the edge of something honest. "You saw me," he said, "when I didn't see myself." I picked up my bag. At the kitchen door, I stopped and turned back, not for sentiment, but because it was true and he deserved to hear it. "For what it's worth," I said, "you sat on the kitchen floor. Men like you don't do that. That was the moment I knew you might be worth saving." I left. I walked out of that estate, past the side gate that had clicked open 4 nights ago and changed everything. I did not look back, not because I was angry or performing a dramatic exit, but because the chapter was finished, and I have always known that the most important thing about a chapter ending is simply to let it end. I took the bus. I sat by the window and watched the city move past, ordinary, loud, indifferent, beautiful in the way cities are when you are free inside them. I had gone into that house with nothing but my eyes, my memory, and my grandmother's voice telling me that the people who are truly strong do not need the room to know it. I came out with everything I had walked in with. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything. And that is the end of Abina's story. But before you go, I want to hear from you. Right now in the comments, tell me honestly, what did you think of this story? Did Abina's courage move you? Did the moment Clara said, "I underestimated you," hit the way I hoped it would? Was there a part that stayed with you? I want your real, honest thoughts, your full review of what you just watched and listened to. The good, the emotional, all of it. Drop it below because your voice matters, and I genuinely read every single comment. And if you are watching this from somewhere in the world right now, whether it is early morning, late at night, or the middle of your afternoon, tell me where. Drop your city, your country, your corner of the world. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever been overlooked, underestimated, or invisible in a room full of people who should have seen you, then share it with someone who needs to be reminded that quiet people see everything. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications because there are more stories coming, just as gripping, just as layered, just as impossible to stop once you start. Every single week. You do not want to arrive late to the next one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know.